everybody, I'm Darrah Steffen. In my April newsletter, I had you vote to see which work in progress you guys would like to read next, and you guys voted that you'd like to see both. So this month, I'm starting with the Legends of Ethota Book 2, Keepers of Knowledge, and here's the prologue. I hope you enjoy. Keepers of Knowledge Prologue. Akamon stood in the trees, his concentration focused perfectly on the spell he was conjuring. Black magic seeped up from the ground around him. The magic took the form of different creatures. Akamon gave him an unspoken command. The creatures moved to different points around the forest and waited. The air reeked of the scent of the Elvateth. She was carrying something very dear to Akamon. He would find out who those humans were. Jenica crept forward along the path. She muttered an Elva connecting with the forest. The wind whistled urgently to her ears. She had more acute senses in the human world. Everything in Mithril had a voice. None of the humans seemed to hear them. Whenever Jenica visited, they assaulted her with their voices. The wind tugged at her hair. Jenica ignored it. It pulled sharply at her. She realized it was trying to speak to her, and she let go of her mental block. She listened carefully. The wind whispered, "Danger! In danger! Black magic!" The wind whipped away from her, leaving the forest silent. Jenica slowly surveyed her surroundings. A shadow sat by a tree that did not belong. Jenica stared at it for a moment. The shadow pulsed. Jenica sprinted away as it leapt for her. The panther was stealthy. It kept pace just behind her. Jenica gritted her teeth. It was toying with her. The beast would attack her, but only after it tormented her. Jenica whispered to the wind, asking it to rampage. The wind whispered listlessly around her. She cursed the human realm. Her powers were useless. She could hear the voices, but she could not command anything as she could in Ethota. Jenica raced down the dirt path. She had to get to the Glaret. If only she could get there in time. Jenica ducked behind the large tree and grabbed her bow. She nocked an arrow. The panther darted into the trees. Jenica didn't relax her bow. She watched the shadows. The darkness shifted. Jenica stepped out from her hiding spot. She carefully aimed and released. The panther leapt from the tree. Her arrow slammed into its eyes. It exploded. Black magic seeped into the ground. Jenica gripped the bow, satisfied. She listened to the wind as it beckoned her. She raced along the path. She would be able to make it before the glare closed. Akamon cursed. He clutched his walking stick, his knuckles turning white. Pain coursed through his body. He muttered curses under his breath. Akamon ordered his creatures out amongst the trees. They quietly surrounded the fleeing girl. Akamon wanted those papers. Jenica skidded to a stop. The land did not look much different from the rest of the trail she had been following. Jenica tossed sand into the air before her. The air shimmered and pulsed. Jenica whispered a string of words in Old Elva. The portal opened. The old-growth forest called her. She took a step towards her home. A growl pulled her back to the park in which she now stood. The black magic creature stepped out from the trees. A wolf howled at her. It swiped at her with its large paws. Jenica glared. This was not the first time she had encountered its ilk. She took another step towards the open portal. A spider jumped in her path. It hissed. Jenica pulled a small bronze ball from her belt. She kept her eyes locked on the two creatures before her. She cupped the bronze ball in her hand and tapped it 3 times with a single finger. Jenica glanced at the portal behind the spider. It reared at her. Jenica took a step back and launched the ball into the portal. The spider screeched. It released a web of silk after it. The ball slammed into the portal, crackling as it passed between the worlds. The black line of silk burned on contact with the pulsating portal. The spider writhed as fire trailed up the web and onto its abdomen. The spider fell. The wolf leapt. Jenica stumbled backward. The wolf fell on top of her. Jenica kicked the beast off. She rose to her knees, muttering in Old Elva. She raised her arms above her head and dropped them. The portal closed with a bang. The wolf sprang at her. Jenica rolled out of its way and jumped to her feet. The wolf clamped down on her leg. Jenica fell to the ground, howling. She thrashed in its grip. Blood flowed from her lacerated leg. Akamon stepped out of the trees and waved his hand. His phantom creatures froze in place. They seemed to melt into the background. The wolf dropped Jenica. Jenica pulled herself to her feet, grimacing. Akamon simply looked in front of her. The spider moved to block her. Jenica limped back. She frantically searched for an escape. With her damaged leg, she would not be able to outrun the creatures. Akamon sneered. He moved with an unexpected speed and seized her by the neck. "Where did you send it?" Akamon dropped her and turned his back to her. Tell me, and I won't harm you. The wolf snapped its jaws in anticipation. Jenica rubbed her throat. She steadied herself on her damaged leg. Why would I ever tell you? Akamon spun, a dagger appearing in his hand. He pressed it to her neck. She gasped as the cool iron bit her skin. He growled, Let's try this again. What did it say? Jenica said nothing. Akamon laughed. I am not afraid of hurting you, princess. Jenica winced as he nicked her skin. Jenica glared at him. Akamon threw her to the ground. The wolf stepped on her chest and lapped at the trickle of blood on her neck. Jenica turned away in disgust. He kneeled down at her side and pressed the dagger to her throat once more. Tell me, or pay the price. Jenica said, Poor Akamon, you will search the world, but you will never find what you are looking for. The old sorcerer's yellow eyes burned hot. He muttered in an old language. The creatures disappeared, pulling into the black ball hovering in his hand. Akamon said, Ah, yes, you should be afraid, princess. Jenica whispered to the wind. The wind whispered back, crying for her. Akamon pressed the black ball to Jenica's face. Her screams echoed throughout the park. Akamon stood over her limp body. He stared down at her and smiled.